The Mindfulness and Grief Podcast offers compassionate insights for coping with grief and life after loss. I'm Heather Stang, author of the Mindfulness and Grief book, and your host for this podcast. Welcome to episode 12. Today's guest is Dave Roberts, an LMSW from New York. And Dave is an author, a counselor, and has contributed articles to a number of publications, including the Huffington Post, and is well known in the Compassionate Friends circles, presenting at various workshops there and leading groups, I believe. Is that correct, Dave?
That's correct, yeah.
Facilitator. So, Dave, I'm really glad to have you here. Of course, you and I were kind of joking at the beginning how none of us really wants to be here, but here we are.
Yep.
And I am grateful for the life of service you have chosen to live in honor of the people you've loved and lost. And I'm going to turn it over to you and let you share your story with us, and also some of the wise guidance that you have for those of us who are bereaved. So welcome, Dave.
Well, thank you, Heather. And I've been looking forward to talking with you for weeks now, so I'm glad we finally had the opportunity to get together, and I'm looking forward to more contact as well, with you in the future. So, as I mentioned, prior to recording our podcast, I don't think anybody gets into the field of grief and loss by choice. I just didn't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to, find a life of service by companioning and helping other individuals who've gone through catastrophic loss. My decisions to do what I made were more out of necessity and through my own circumstances than anything else. I've been no stranger to loss. Ever since the age of 5 years old, when my father left home, just abandoned us, and my mother raised me pretty much as an only child, I never saw my dad again. And that had a profound impact on my life. And that was something I was not able to come to peace with until I was in my later 50s. It took me almost 52 years in countless, grief work to realize that my father's leaving was more of a gift, of blessing, and an outpouring of his love for us than it was abandonment, because he couldn't stay in a traditional marriage. But it took me 52 years and a ton of grief work to figure that out. I've had a variety of different losses of friends and family over the years due to cancer, sudden death. I have, again, danced with grief ever since I can remember. The loss, however, that really caused me to take a look at my priorities, my values, the rules that kept me safe and secure, was the death of my 18-year-old daughter, Jeannine, on March 1st, 2003. She died of a very rare form of cancer. It was a connective muscle tissue sarcoma. And it was very aggressive. We were told at the time of our consult, where the diagnosis was confirmed, that there was no cure for her cancer. She was stage 4 diagnosis. Her primary site was her right foot, which she had injured several months before. We all thought it was just a regular foot injury that would respond to, walking boot elevation. But when her foot failed to go to return to normal size, they did an MRI and a biopsy, and it was highly suggestive of cancer, and the diagnosis was confirmed. She was stage 4 with bone marrow and lymph node involvement. So I was told, and she was told, and her family was told, that there was no cure for her cancer. The only chance we were going to have at a cure was if her chemotherapy put it in remission until they could find a cure. So essentially what I heard, what Jeannine heard, and what the rest of my family heard was that there's a pretty good likelihood that she was going to die. And I had gotten this news a week after I had completed the requirements for my master's in social work degree at SUNY Albany. So I went from the elation of embarking on another, career adventure to now being involved as a parent who is going to be an emotional caretaker and support person for my 18-year-old daughter who had been diagnosed with cancer. She went through 6 very aggressive rounds of chemotherapy. Her cancer never went into total remission. In January of 2003, her cancer remetastasized. We were given a prognosis at that time of 1 to 3 months. Jeannine opted in February of 2003 to discontinue treatment. We called in hospice services, and she died approximately 10 days later on March 1st, 2003, at home with her family and friends by her side. I was the last one to witness her taking her last breaths. She died at 12:30 in the morning on March 1st. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that in early grief, I saw myself as the last person who saw her alive and witnessed her last breath. And I'd always framed it like that I was the last person to see her alive to witness her die. And then I had a very wise, good friend and spiritual mentor about a few years ago, right? Tell me, hey, and when I mentioned that to her, she goes, well, consider that you were the first person to be chosen to usher her into her new life. So looking at it from that perspective allowed me to look at her moment of death differently. And I know you asked me earlier, what are some of the things that I've done? I'm in the 16th year of walking the path of a parent who's experienced a child. And one of the things I've attempted to do is really embrace a variety of different perspectives to begin to look at what happened to me differently, to look at Jeannine's life differently, to look at her death differently, and to look at the aftermath differently.
And that's what mindfulness is looking at the big picture and seeing all of the different aspects, all the different perspectives, not just a narrow view, and even how you relate to her moment of death, ending and beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a non-dualism there too.
Yep. And I was raised Catholic, Heather, so I'm very familiar with the dualistic philosophy of heaven and hell and either or in a lot of the teachings. And that wasn't going to do it for me in this phase of my life. I had to embrace a very eclectic perspective of spirituality. I've embraced much of Native American teachings of nature and animals. I probably embraced a little bit of Buddhism unconsciously. I've embraced after-death communications and signs and the continuing bonds work of Dennis Class, where essentially our relationships with our loved ones continue after death, just in a different and perhaps an even more pure form, devoid of all the earthly contracts that caused us to have conflicts in our waking lives. But it's been a process over the years of being able to embrace this type of perspective. And even though I feel most days at peace with where I'm at with Jeannine's death, because of the perspective that I've embraced, I still have many moments where I yearn for her physical presence, particularly around significant dates that involve her surviving siblings or just involve other milestone events. And that never totally goes away. But I look at those physical yearnings to me now as another gift of remembrance, as opposed to being something that needed to be devoutly avoided because it was so painful in early grief.
I'm really glad you shared that, because I think we can't say it enough that it doesn't matter what time has passed.
Yep.
That there are going to be days, where grief blindsides you. And again, how you're looking at it, you probably wouldn't even say it's a blind side. You said it's a gift of remembrance. It's a reminder. It's a bell of awareness. I am missing her, and that is an artifact of my love.
Yep. And that's it. And one of the things that I think many of us, I think we fear is that we're going to forget the sound of their voice, and we're going to forget their existence. And I think that's a fear that many individuals share in grief, is that the people that we have lost due to death will never be remembered. But I look at it this way: my daughter isn't lost because I know where she is. She's right here. And the other things that have helped is that I have taken the best parts of my daughter, who she was, and I've made them a part of me. So we're kind of, when we talk, whenever I do a workshop, whenever I do an interview, I tell people we're a package deal. You're getting the best of me and the best of my daughter.
Yeah.
And that's allowed me to keep the bond alive. That's also allowed me to find some peace knowing that I carry her with me. As I carry my grief now in a softer and more integrated way, I carry her as well too.
That's a beautiful way of putting it, that you're carrying them both softly. You
Yep.
know. And again, that non-dualism of you can have the pain and the joy at, you
Yep.
know, at the same time.
Well, you know, the other thing too, I think grief is a microcosm of life. I mean, even in the best of times, how many people do you know are happy 24/7, 7 days a week? There's always some challenges. Yet we're a society that prides ourselves on happiness, functionality, and success. And if we have any type of prolonged emotional experience, negative emotional experience due to grief, it now becomes pathologized. And to me, I don't hang around happy people, Heather, and nor do I want to hang around happy people. I like to hang around people who are genuine with their emotions. If they're having a bad day, if they tell me, today is really, really a crappy day, I can deal with that because nobody's doing good 100% all of the time. And if we can embrace kind of the yin and the yang, if we embrace those emotions that society has told us are not productive, but if we see them for what they can teach us and the gifts that they contain, it makes us whole in anything that we do. Like, sometimes people will tell us in grief, well, it's been a year, why are you still sad? Well, because my child is still dead, so I'm still going to be sad. I'm going to carry sadness that's going to coexist with joy. But how many people do you know have told you that sadness leads to deep compassion, leads to deep introspection? That anger, if we're our anger may be a gift because it gives us the energy to get through a difficult moment. That our solitude allows us to go within and find the answers that we need to continue on the journey. I mean, I asked myself all kinds of questions. Why did Jeannine have to die? Why was my family picked? And I went through that what if and question cycle for probably the first 2.5 years of my grief. And then when I sat in the quiet, when I stopped asking the questions, I got all the answers that I needed. Because once I quieted my mind, my intuition, kind of took over. And that was kind of the form of mindfulness that I practiced, was quieting my mind, quieting everything, and just letting things come to me rather than try to force it and try to find answers that no matter what answer I came up with wasn't going to be satisfactory to me.
So it sounds like thinking your way through it wasn't working, trying to figure it out, why, and come up with an answer. So in quieting your mind, what was your personal practice? What did that actually look like? Did you do formal meditation? Did you go out in nature? What was Dave's way?
I think both was kind of, and I don't use meditation as a practice, and I think there's a difference between using meditation as a practice and using it as a tool. I don't use it as a formal practice, but I've used it as a tool, whether it be walking out in nature, just closing my eyes for 10 to 15 minutes and, just allowing any thoughts to come into consciousness, and then just look at those thoughts for what they are and let them drift. Just look at whatever came into my mind at a particular time, or if I stated a particular intention during meditation, to see what that revealed to me. So it was just a variety of different. There's also nature, spending time out in nature is really helpful. And I tell individuals, you don't have to spend 7 or 8 hours in nature. But if you spend 20 to 30 minutes in nature and you're mindful of what's going on around you, in terms of which animal happens across your path that may have a specific teaching for you, how the wind is what direction the wind is blowing. That can also, in Native American culture, reveal some really rich teachings. A tree that you may be particularly attracted to, just anything. In 20 minutes and 30 minutes of just being mindful and committing to walking in awareness, literally, you can pick up a lot of different tools that can help you help you develop some good coping skills where it comes to grief.
What you're sharing is a balance between simply being mindful. There's the Native American teachings, which I'm not too familiar with, which maybe you could share a little more about that, but also the integration piece, which I think is really important when you're using meditation or yoga as a tool.
Yep.
Is what did I notice during this practice, and how does it relate to my life? What does it mean to me?
Exactly, and it's just a matter of committing to awareness and looking at how every person that comes into your life, how every animal that crosses your path, how every breeze that blows your way, what does it have to teach me?
Yeah.
What can I learn from that? Like, say, for example, the Native American teachings of animals and medicine were introduced to me by a good friend of mine and mentor by name Patty Farino. She's an interfaith minister in Long Island. And Patty was responsible personally for my own personal spiritual awakening about 8 years ago. Her wisdom, her guidance, her intuition got me to the stage where I'm at now, where I could jumpstart my awareness to another level. And this would be kind of another show. I couldn't even go into, there's a lot of detail to go into that with it. But Patty and I met, and the interaction that I had with Patty with my spiritual awakening happened because I asked for it. I had stated to the universe 2 months earlier that I wanted to be at a different level of spiritual awareness. And 2 months later, Patty and I had, I had met Patty before then, but, we had spent some time out in Long Island, and the rest kind of just really, jump-started my awareness. She introduced me to the Native American teachings of Jamie Sams and Ted Andrews. Jamie Sams has written a book called Medicine Cards with David Carson, and Ted Andrews is, major of his Animal Speaks. And he also gets into the teachings of nature as well, too. So once I committed to using, those teachings of animals, if an animal crossed my path, I would consult the Sams or Andrews book and see what the teachings revealed. And particularly, or with the Sams book, there's cards, so you can intuitively draw a card from the deck, take a look at the teachings, and see how it relates. And what I would do is, with any animal that crossed my path, there would be a series of questions that I would ask myself. Say, for example, deer. Deer is about gentleness to self and others, and it's also about the gentle call to adventure. Interestingly, the first card that I picked with Patty in Long Island was deer, which was profound because I was having a great deal of difficulty being gentle with myself after my daughter's death. I felt that I should have done more to be mindful of her diagnosis. I should have helped her diagnosis sooner, convince her to do more clinical trials or another clinical trial or more treatments. But what I discovered is that my job wasn't to protect her or to help her make adult decisions, and it was for her to live on her terms and die on her terms. So with the deer card, to dovetail with that, I would ask myself, okay, am I not being gentle with myself? What are some ways that I can incorporate gentleness to myself and others? The deer is also about gentle call to adventure. So what are some ways that I can increase my sense of adventure and grief to give me some different experiences that may help me cope, with what I'm dealing with in the aftermath of my daughter's death? The cool thing about animal teachings to me and nature is that you can develop your own intuition. You can use a very here and now physical world approach to come up with your own connections and awareness. And for people who are kind of ambivalent about an afterlife, these provide here and now worldly tools to develop your own intuition and higher levels of thinking.
And that skill of integration.
Yep.
How am I like the deer? How am I possessing these qualities? Or,
yep.
I'm sure that we just had a podcast with a friend who is a dietitian and eating disorder specialist, and I'm thinking, how am I relating to food like the squirrel when I'm grieving? Maybe first not eating and then shoveling it in. What's going on there? There's probably so many animal metaphors for life and loss because that's what they do.
Mhm.
as they're out there
And
living it.
even some people say, I saw a cardinal that reminds me of my deceased father, that reminds me of
Right.
my, of my son or my daughter, and that's fine. I mean, the thing with animal teachings is you can interpret these any way you want. You can interpret an animal as just a pure sign, a pure reincarnation of your deceased loved one, or you could take it a step further and say, what further teachings does this animal have to reveal to me that can help me towards the process of integration along the path of after death. So
I had a bluebird that showed up shortly after my grandmother died, and
mhm,
it obsessively was trying to get into the house.
mhm,
Um, and what I took from that was that she still wanted to know what was going on
mhm. Oh
because that
yeah,
was part of her. That was
yep,
part of her persona anyway. But it wanted, it felt like it wanted to be close to me, and it wanted to know what was happening, and and it was very persistent,
mhm,
and it was just a really strong, beautiful, connection. Um, so whether, like you said, whether we're seeing it as a reincarnation or as a bell of awareness about our own emotions, our own way of relating to the world, there's a lot of wisdom out there in
yep.
nature.
And it's basically it's about what do you believe and how do you interpret it.
Yeah.
There are many different paths to integration, and they all work. And I tell individuals that I companion in a bereavement capacity that as long as what you believe is not hurting yourself, is not hurting anybody else, it's all good.
Right.
Um, it's whatever is going to get you through the next path, the next step in your journey, the next step on your path. It's whatever's going to work. Um, it's our job to be compassionate witnesses to the paths that others walk, as opposed to judging the paths that others walk.
I want to circle back to our discussion about difficult emotions. You were bringing up
Mhm.
anger as, giving you the fuel to deal with something. And this is shadow work. This is looking at
Yep,
the emotions that we tend to shove down or put in a
yep,
closet
yep.
as powerful messengers. And most of us know that from experience, maybe I shouldn't say most of us know, but many of us know from experience that when we avoid our difficult emotions, they usually don't go away. they,
No.
they don't dissipate. In fact, there's a little pithy quote I've heard that I've probably said on this podcast before, but emotions that get ignored go down into the basement and lift weights.
Yep. Well, and the other thing with emotions too, and Debbie Ford, and I know you're familiar with Debbie Ford's work with their marvelous book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, where she talks about doing shadow work. She did her own shadow work, because of a variety of different challenges in her life. But she talked about the analogy of kind of, and I'm going to use this with emotional suppression or trying to outrun our emotions. It's like if you take a beach ball and you suppress it, let's say a tub of water, whenever you let pressure off of that beach ball, what's going to happen? It's going to
Pops
come to the
right back
surface.
up.
So if let's say that beach ball is your anger, and now you try to suppress it along with several of your friends who would love to see you suppress your anger and suppress any type of negative emotion that they're uncomfortable with as it relates to your own grief process, they're going to help you suppress that. But then what happens when they either let up on the ball or the natural undercurrent of the water takes hold? It's like that your anger, that beach ball, which is your anger or your grief or your sadness, is going to come up. So the message is I'm here. I'm not going away. So you can either suppress me or allow me to be a wise teacher to you on your path to transformation. The choice is yours. And so in once I understood that and I allowed those emotions to coexist with with any type of moments of joy or happiness that I had, I became more whole, I became more at peace during the grief journey, and I became, more genuine with how I felt because I was allowing everything to teach me. I began to see that there was a lot of light in dark emotions because, and there's usually, it's like, again, that yin and the yang.
So what
that I
advice?
learned to embrace.
Oh, sorry. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. I'm good.
What advice would you have for someone who's listening where, just the idea of turning towards the dark emotion creates a lot of fear?
And well, and the thing is, and it does, and it's change. And a lot of us are afraid of change. Many of us are afraid of change, but change is really, I'm going to paraphrase, I think, a quote from the Afterlife of Billy Fingers, a book by Annie Kagan, which is one of my favorite books on the afterlife. And I think I think it goes like something like, everybody's afraid of change, but change is the double fudge frosting on the cupcake of life. And that's, that has always stuck with me. So one is, I would say, let your fear be greater than your faith. Or let your excuse. Let me reverse that. Let your faith be greater than your fear.
Let your faith be greater than your
not your fear be greater. You can strike that one or it over.
We'll all ignore it.
Well, just ignore that. But let your faith be greater than your fear.
Yeah. So kind of trusting that you're not going to be, you're not actually going to be overtaken by it, where you can, the point of no return.
And the other thing is support. If you're a parent who's experienced the death of a child, find a support group, either the Compassionate Friends, the Bereaved Parents of the USA, or if there isn't one available in your area, perhaps a local funeral home who is sponsoring. And get in touch with individuals who are experiencing the same type of loss, particularly those who are later along in the grief journey as well, too, because they can be a mirror for you in terms of what it is that you need to do to get to that next step. They may have already done a lot of their own shadow work, either consciously or unconsciously, to get to that point. They can show you, either model, they can discuss, this is what I did, this is what I helped, what helped me. And the other thing is to read as much as you can, to the extent that you are capable of reading, whether it's other memoirs from parents who have experienced the death of a child, other books that I found helpful, like, later grief was like Debbie Ford's book, Dark Side of the Light Chasers. Brian Weiss's Many Lives, Many Masters, which gives some different, very more sacred perspectives on death, reincarnation, past lives, soul contracts. Also, any books that you can find on after-death communication. Bill and Judy Guggenheim's Hello from Heaven. Kay Whitmer Woods also wrote a book called Visions of the Bereaved. And also to be open to the fact that our loved ones can still communicate with us, and to be open to those signs. And not only signs that they are okay, that we are going to see them when we cross over, but let those signs be an indication that we can maintain a continued bond and relationship in a very pure, very spiritual sense long after they're gone, and that they will continue to guide us if we allow that.
Yeah. I feel like I have many people who hang out on my shoulder, my ancestors, my loved ones who have died, and they sometimes whisper, sometimes they scream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and or sometimes they're doing this,
right.
which is,
like,
which is, and I feel like I have a variety of guides. It's just not my daughter. It's a variety of different spiritual. I remember one time I did a meditation where specifically I would meditate where I specifically requested to meet one of my spirit guides. And what happened is, the vision that I had, I was flying on the back of a dove to a higher elevation, and I saw a young Native American male with a half mask with a green aura. And green, as you know, is the color of nature. And that was very real. So I had asked for that. I said, okay, I want to meet one, and I did. So that is also further evidence, in addition to other types of signs that I've received from, my daughter and I think my other ancestors, that we survive death, and that we are capable of existing in another form of energy and communicating in that form of energy. That has also given me a lot of peace, knowing that we can use that to develop an ongoing relationship and bond with our deceased loved ones.
You have so many tools in your toolkit. And I love that. And I think that's really encouraging for anyone who's listening, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, probably even an infinite number of ways to approach life after loss, our own meaning making and sense finding. I mean, not, there are many people who are listening who are going to feel or experience that, coming up with the reason why somebody died. There may not be that, but coming up with the reason of why you keep going.
Yep.
That's the piece that we all need to find, is what is going to allow me to wake up tomorrow and continue and re-engage. And one of the things that you're doing that many bereaved parents or bereaved children or anybody in, any type of relationship do is serving other people.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's, in your case, you do both volunteer and professional service.
Yep.
Because of, you're an LMSW.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to actually come back to that in a moment. But you don't necessarily have to be a licensed professional or have a background to help. And so just could you speak briefly to those who are listening who maybe don't have a professional bereavement background, but might be thinking about ways to use their experience to serve others and how that helped you?
Well, I think one of the things I'll say is that being a therapist, and I've been an addictions professional for years prior to my daughter's illness and death, my own work as a therapist and working with other clients didn't even begin to remotely prepare me for the path I was walking. And a lot of people had asked me, did being a therapist really help you in terms of dealing with the loss of your daughter? No, it didn't, because as a parent, you're never prepared to bury your child. And that was totally foreign territory for me. The compassionate friends are composed specifically of parents who have experienced the death of a child, the parents helping other parents. You may be able to want to get involved in some capacity in your local compassionate friends group. Once, let's say, even if you go as, as a participant, your story may still be of service to somebody else. Some other parent may be having a challenge that you can identify with, that you dealt with. So you can also be of service in that way by telling them what worked for you. So that's one way to do that. And then eventually you can maybe look at, well, maybe I'd like to facilitate a group. Maybe I'd like to become more active in my chapter. But it can be simply as something as doing volunteer work in the name of your child and at an agency or, with an initiative that you feel strongly about, that your child felt strongly about. So service can come in a variety of different ways. Heather, I even look at service as opening up a door for somebody, literally, in terms of like just going out of your way to be nice to somebody who may be having a bad day. And it's just that to me is even a form of service. It isn't about building a foundation. It isn't about being a facilitator. It's just doing those little things that honor the memory of your child, that honor what your child represented in any ways that are comfortable, whether it's volunteer work, whether it's doing acts of kindness, whether it's companioning bereaved parents, anything. And one of the things that you will find is that when you sit with another parent and they share your story, that's one of the most intimate moments that you will share with anybody, is a story of life and loss. If they have shared your story with you, consider that to be the ultimate gift because they trust you with it. And a lot of people ask, well, how can you continue to do this work? Doesn't it depress you? Stories inspire me, and they continue to inspire me to continue to do the work on the path that I do. And it's just I never thought my life would take the turn that it has taken 16 years ago. But at this point, I can't see myself doing anything else. Yeah. And I do it with my daughter firmly at my side, and all of her ancestors and my ancestors.
Thank you so much for sharing her with us through you. And,
you're welcome.
And now I think whenever I open the door for a stranger, I will probably remember this conversation. Because you're right, you don't know what any other person walking on the face of this earth is going through on any given day.
Yep, you don't. And then maybe that one door that you opened and that one smile saved them from committing an act of self-destruction.
Right. Yeah. Well, Dave, if people want to learn more about you, about your publications, I'd love for you to share that with us, and please tell us about Angel and Bootsy.
Bootsy and Angel were two of my daughter Jeannine's cats. And they were both, Bootsy was a Christmas gift from her best friend, and Angel was a rescue cat. And I was with Jeannine when we found Angel. So the website, Bootsy and Angel Books, was named after Jeannine's two cats. Bootsy and Angel have since crossed over to Rainbow Bridge. And so I know firmly that they were both romping somewhere with my daughter. I know that for a fact. And that's how we got the name of the website. My website is basically just a resource for individuals who are grieving. I have links to some really good sites, links to articles that I've written for a variety of publications and my author pages. Everything there's also an online store which contains our pet loss and holiday books. So there's it's a resource for individuals to go. They don't have to pay a fee. They can read any articles that I've written, any links that I've had, and they can accumulate as many resources that they think may help them on their own path after loss. So it's there as a service to those who choose to use it.
And that's bootsyandangel.com.
Bootsyandangel.com, and they can reach me via email too at bootsyandangel@gmail.com as well too. So they can reach me, and I'm on Facebook. So there's a link to our Facebook pages, so they can find me anywhere.
And you're in private practice too? Is that correct?
I do some part-time private practice as well too. I see about a couple nights a week, and that's pretty much what I have time for in addition to teaching, doing bereavement support, writing, and a variety of different things. I'm technically retired from my job as an addictions professional, but I've just retired to doing a variety of other different things that I love.
Retired, but still very busy.
Yeah, I couldn't stay standing home, and my wife wouldn't like it either.
Right. Well, and the world would certainly miss you and your spark and the support that you provide to so many. And I think for many bereaved people who've gone into a life of service, that's not something you can give up. It's what you do. It's not even work.
No, it isn't work. It's really more of a passion for me.
Yeah.
With my teaching and my bereavement support, it's a passion. These are things I don't look at as things that I have to do. These are things that I want to do.
Yeah. And
things that are an extension of who I am. It's one of the many categories in my life that I've embraced.
Well, thank you, Dave, for sharing all these perspectives with us. I almost want to do a podcast on each one, on the shadow work, on the Native American animal traditions. You've given us so much to think about, and just in kind of to sum up everything you've shared with us, do you have any final words you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, there's a couple. One, be gentle to yourself. Grief is always a marathon. It's never a sprint. And it will take as long as it's going to take for us to get from the raw pain of grief to feelings of acceptance that our world is what it is at this point, and also our willingness to try to live a life of meaning and service in spite of what's happened. So, and it's always a process. And grief is always circular. It's never linear.
Thank you, Dave. I'm grateful for you.
Thank
Namaste.
You. Namaste to you too, Heather. And I'm glad we had this time together.
Me too. I look forward to the next.
Me too.
Thank you for joining us for the Mindfulness and Grief Podcast. If you found the information helpful, please help others find us by rating, reviewing, or subscribing to this podcast wherever you download your favorite shows. For additional grief support, including free guided meditations, visit us on the web at mindfulnessandgrief.com and consider adding the Mindfulness and Grief book to your self-care toolkit. Special thanks to our sound engineer, Todd Campbell of Hub City Recording, and to the Atomic Mosquitoes for our theme music. I'm Heather Stang, and I hope these teachings will be of great benefit to all who receive them. Until next time, namaste.